It's fantastic to welcome everyone in this virtual room. Welcome. My name is Natalia Khanenko-Friesen. I am the director of the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, and I'm very pleased to launch today a phenomenally important new series for the Institute, which we have coordinated and collaborated on for about a year, seminar series, Rethinking Ukraine's Environment, War, Ecocide, and Beyond. This is a new series at the Institute, and we have worked together with a number of our partners to bring this series to you. Hosted by our Institute, this international seminar series is a joint initiative of the Environmental History Ukraine Research Group, and as well as our Institute, but also with further support from the Center for Baltic and Eastern European Studies, Soderdamm University, as well as Center for Governance and Culture in Europe at the University of St. Gallen, and the European Society for Environmental History, of which I understand the Environmental History Ukraine is a very important member. I'm connecting with you from the Treaty 6 territory. It is in Western Canada, the land known as Alberta, Saskatchewan, the land which had risen and become to be working grounds for us and playing ground for us here at the University of Alberta on a basis of treaties which were signed between Indigenous peoples and Canadian government, British government at the time. It is important for us to recognize the fact that we work on the Indigenous lands because we actually, especially in the context of this seminar series, it is important for us to acknowledge a lot of lessons we're taking from our Indigenous colleagues, Indigenous partners, when it comes to revisit and reevaluation of that very important relationship between humans and their own lands. Treaty 6 territory is a vast land. University of Alberta is a proud member of that cohort of academics who are working out of Canada on such important topics as environmental history. And I think many in this room could even think back to the very beginnings of our nation, steeped in this understanding of how nature is important to Canadians and how much that very relationship between people, nature, environment have shaped the very narrative of what Canada is the very understanding and what Canada should be. And of course, heading into the second quarter now of 21st century, that very relationship is on the radar for so many. The devastating war, the full-scale invasion, which was launched by the Russian Federation in 2022, brought international attention to the lot of the environment of Ukraine. So we're very proud to collaborate with our partners in the environmental history of Ukraine, the group which will be for the year gathering here in our webinar series from time to time and reflecting on important aspects of studying, exploring, examining both the aftermath of the war and its impact on the environment, but most importantly, the relationship between people, a nation, and the Ukrainian environment as together that needs to come forward and perhaps address pressing questions which all need answers as we go forward into the future, despite the fact that the war is still unfolding. Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies is proud to position itself as a global leader in the field of Ukrainian studies in the world. We're a known entity to many for about 49 years. Next year, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. And I'm very proud and very pleased to be running into this 50th anniversary with such a talented team as today's presenters who are behind this initiative. I'm happy to pass on the baton to the moderator of this session, and I believe it is Yulia Malitska. Thank you and welcome all.
Yes, thank you very much, Natalia. Thank you for opening the seminar series and this seminar, and we are very much thankful to the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies for infrastructural and administrative support. So today we have three excellent speakers: Anna Kuzemko, Darya Tsymbalyuk, and Anna Olenenko. And I would like to present you first of all. So Anna Kuzemko is a botanist and environmentalist, Doctor of Biological Sciences and leading researcher at the Institute of Botany, National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. She co-founded the NGO Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group and serves as vice president of the Ukrainian Botanical Society. Her research focuses on vegetation and natural habitats of Ukraine and Europe, with recent studies addressing the ecological impact of military activities on ecosystems during the ongoing war. Our second presenter is Darya Tsymbalyuk. Darya is an assistant professor at the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures and the Committee on Environment, Geography, and Urbanization at the University of Chicago. Darya is the author of Ecocide in Ukraine, The Environmental Cost of Russia's War, a book that was published this year. Together with Tanya Richardson, Darya co-edited a double special issue on the environmental humanities of Ukraine, forthcoming in East-West Journal of Ukrainian Studies. So we are very, very much looking forward to this, to these two very important collections. And last but not least, Anna Olenenko. Anna is a PhD candidate in Media and Cultural Studies at the University of Alberta and a research assistant of the Kew Folklore Center. Anna is co-founder of the Environmental History of Ukraine Research Group. She also serves as the regional representative of Ukraine, chair of Council of Regional Representatives, and a member of the board of the European Society for Environmental History. Anna's research interests include the environmental history of Ukraine, particularly the steppe region, animal studies, and oral history. So, and my name is Yulia Malitska. I have an honor to moderate the seminar. I am a lecturer and historian of animal history and environment at the Södertörn University, Stockholm. So some words should be said about the format of the seminar. The total duration of our seminar is 1.5 hours, and each presenter has 15 minutes. After the individual presentations, the floor will be opened for Q&A session. So I would ask our attendees to write their questions in the chat. So I think this is a great setup. So I give a word to Anna. Anna Kuzemko, please, the floor is yours.
Perfect, great. Thank you, Julia. Hello for everyone. My name is Anna Kuzemko. I'm a vegetation scientist, and you know that we are scientists love to measure everything. And when full-scale invasion of Russian Federation in Ukraine started, we started to think and to talk about ecocide. And in our research group, we decided to measure ecocide and to distinguish ecocide from the environmental crimes. But when we analyzed the definitions of ecocide in the Criminal Code of Ukraine and the proposal to Rome Statute, we revealed that it's not so easy because of two problems: the value judgment of ecocide and lack of criteria for ecocide and criminal acts against the environment. So we, a group of biologists, together with lawyers from charitable organization Ecology, Environment, People, Law, we decided to develop a criteria of ecocide. And here you can see this 6 criteria, and in my talk I will try to explain all of these criteria. The first criterion is about species populations, and it states that if the act causes the complete disappearance of entire population of at least one species of flora or fauna, or alternatively the remaining population is less than 20% of original population, it could be considered as ecocide. And I would like to tell you a story about this species of newt. It's a very rare species, Danube newt, Triturus dobrodicus, red-listed species with very limited distribution in Ukraine. And the Dnieper population of this species was affected by destruction of Kakhovka Dam, and this freshwater species was moved to the salt water of Black Sea, and our colleagues from Tuzlovsky Liman National Nature Park revealed many dead individuals on the Black Sea coast. Fortunately, some of these species was rescued, but unfortunately the area of its distribution in lower Dnieper is still unavailable for us. So the state of their population and real loss is unclear for now. And the same situation also with some small mammals which are also distributed in this area. Another story is about lichen species Certinaria ukrainica. We revealed this species during field work in May 2021, and already at the time it was clear that this is something unique, unusual, and probably new for science. And next week, 2022, it was confirmed by DNA analysis that this species is new for science. And already next year, 2023, the locality of this species was affected by flooding because of destruction of Kakhovka Dam. And paper about this species was published only in 2024, so it quite possible that it was published after very big damage or even disappearance of this species. The second criteria is about biotic communities or associations. And if it completely destroyed or no more than 10% of the area remains, it also could be considered as ecocide. And here you can see picture taken by me in 2009 in Lugansk region, Kremensky Lisy National Nature Park. It's unique for this region community of elder forest with ostrich fern, Mateutia strutiopteris. And on the map you can see location of this national park. And this forest, Serebryansky forest, now it's very famous because of pictures which were published in many Ukrainian and international media. It's results of 4 years of active hostilities, and now this forest completely destroyed together with these unique plant communities. Another story about association Xanthorrhetum tendrensis. It's also communities of lichens which formed on the coast of Tendra Island in Black Sea Biosphere Reserve. It also was affected by flooding because of Kakhovka case, and now situation with these communities, we have no information about the current situation. The next criterion is about unique habitats that has existed only within certain geographical region, and if it completely destroyed or no more than 10% of its area remains, we also consider it as ecocide. The example could be pine forest on chalk outcrops. These habitat types was included in Resolution 4 of Bern Convention based on our proposals in 2018. And unfortunately, these habitat type distributed only in northern part of Donetsk region, and we visited some benchmark localities of this habitat type in Svetigore National Park in 2023, and we revealed that all of them were damaged by shelling, fires, and almost all trees were dead, and it's very low probability that it's possible restoration of this habitat type. Another example, depressions or pode of the steppe zone. It's also unique habitat type, and again we propose to include it to the Resolution 4 of Bern Convention. It could be ponds, it could be wetlands or meadows or even steppe. in different years. And this habitat type include many very rare species, and the main distribution of this habitat type is left bank of Kherson region. And now 100% of these habitats are under occupation, and we have no information about the current state. Fourth criterion is also about habitats. Habitats listed in the UNESCO World Natural Heritage List or under protection of Resolution 4 of Bern Convention. And if it destroyed, or even if 50% of its area was destroyed, it also could be, in our opinion, it could be considered as ecocide. And example, it's habitats, continental dry rocky steppe grasslands and dwarf shrub on chalk outcrop. This habitat type distributed in Kharkiv, Lugansk and Donetsk region, so it's has a more wide distribution than previous two types. But it's included in Resolution 4 of Bern Convention. And when we visited some sites in Svetigor National Park, we revealed that these habitats are very damaged because of shelling. Here you can see craters with some rare species in the surrounding, and also it damaged by trenches and other fortifications. And based on satellite images and also other data, we receive result that probably more than 50% of these habitats in habitat type in Ukraine are damaged. And when we are talking about UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site, we have only one this type of object in Ukraine. It's ancient and primeval beech forest of the Carpathians and other regions of Europe. Here you can see all these green dots in Europe and also in Ukraine with these localities. And you can see that these habitats distributed only in western part of Ukraine, but you know that all territory of Ukraine now under shelling and attacks of drones and missiles, and we have quite a big damages even in Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk and even the Zakarpattia region with victims, human victims. So this habitat type is also under the threat of war. And two last criteria are more anthropocentric, and criterion 5 states that if the act causes the destruction of habitats within some territory, resulting in 75% of the population that previously received direct or indirect ecosystem services no longer receiving them after act. So good example is again a Kakhovka case, which caused a lot of social economical problems for people, for local people, and especially problem with drinking water. And not only in this region, but also in Crimea. And the last criterion, 6, it's about the act which causes displacement of more than 50% of the population because of pollution or destruction of the landscape. The most famous example of for this is Chernobyl exclusion zone. But if we are talking about current war, of course, people move from the region with active hostilities because of safety reason. But here you can see the map of ecological situation there and humanitarian situation. And of course, the big question if this territory, when this territory will be liberated, but I still believe that this territory will be liberated by Ukrainian army if people return to there or not. because of these territories are still heavily mined. You know that Ukraine is the most mined country in the world, and because of pollutions by chemicals from explosions and optic fibers, etc., etc. So this is the last criterion. And at the end of my talk, I would like to highlight some problems which we revealed during study in this area. Of course, the main problem is safety and availability of the territories for field research. You know that 1/3 of entire Ukrainian territory now unavailable for field research. But another problem is insufficient number of experts. We already feel the lack of experts, at least people who can identify species of flora and fauna. And now we have a lot of work, but when the territory will be liberated, documentation of all these ecocides and environmental crimes need much more people. And of course, we are very grateful to all our partners who support Ukrainian scientists who move abroad. But it would be good to have also such programs for people who are still live and work in Ukraine. And another quite unexpected problem that it's very difficult to publish our results in peer-reviewed journal, not because of their quality, but because of position of some editors of some journals, because these people prefer to avoid mention about Russian aggression or war, and we faced this problem because already our papers about Kakhovka was rejected from several journals, and I know that our colleagues from different area also faced this problem, and we decided to analyze the situation, and Ukrainian media Text.org UA published the results of these analytics. And if you want to read more, please scan this QR code. So my very last message that when we tried to measure ecocide, we revealed that ecocide, it's not necessarily something very huge or very massive. And in this regard, scope is not so important than consequences. And in my opinion, the irreversible disappearance of any creature, even very tiny creature, can be also considered as ecocide. And I would like to express my gratitude to all people who were involved in this study, and also organization, Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group and Environment People Law. And I'm extremely grateful to all defenders of Ukraine because I'm still alive and able to do science. And all of you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your talk. And I would like to pass the word to Darya.
I'm glad that Anna mentioned the Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group, and I always open all my talks with also reminding many people of you, of course, know Anna is a co-founder, but for those of you who don't know, that there's also a possibility to donate to Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group, which would be very important. So please spread the word, donate if you can. And as far as I know, not only supports the vital research and work on the ground, but also environmentalists who are displaced and affected by the war. So once again, the people who are actually documenting these cases. So I always try to open with them. And I'm going to pick up actually on several points that Anna mentioned in terms of legal questions. And I will end and kind of arrive to talking about my book that just came out. I have it right here. A big disclaimer that I'm not a legal expert and legal scholar, but since the question of ecocide is so present in the public and scholarly discourse, it's kind of inevitable that I engage with this debate. But I want to suggest to kind of follow the term ecocide today also as a marker of this important shift in terms of public discourse but also, of course, legal efforts on the ground documented. But I believe it goes beyond just the legal effort, and that's why I want to engage with this different dimensions of that term. We'll open with a quote from Giorgia Mehta, who's a co-founder of Stop Ecocide International, who in her keynote at Harvard just this past February said, criminal law and cultural change are connected, not exactly causally, but in terms of key inflection points that create powerful shifts. And as I said, exactly these shifts, both in terms of culture, but also law, that I'm interested in. And Anna already outlined, but that the Article 441, of course, exists in Ukrainian criminal code, which was adopted in 2001. And while it's important that it is there, the environmental people law, the environmental people law, Ecological Prava Людина, did several reports in terms of whether it was used prior to 2022, and there was not a single indictment based on this law prior to the full-scale invasion. Currently, I think there are at least 15 cases being investigated. But it's important and interesting to look at the history of this domestic law in Ukraine. What's also important to know that in 2021, the Specialized Environmental Prosecutor's Office was established in Ukraine, so just before the full-scale invasion, which allows, of course, then engage in the investigation of these cases on the ground, and that's quite important. As mentioned, on the international level, it's the initiative Stop Ecocide International that was founded in 2017. There is really campaigning for the addition of ecocide as the 5th international crime of the Rome Statute. And Polly Higgins, late Polly Higgins, and Giorgia Mehta are the co-founders of this. And they also, Anna already had it as a slide, but the independent expert panel proposed the definition of ecocide that you can see here in 2021. What's also important that it is in a war context that the term ecocide originally emerged. This history is traced in detail in the book by David Searler, The Invention of Ecocide. And then the origin of the term comes in the time of Vietnam War in the US, and it's the American scientists that come up with it during their campaign to stop the herbicide warfare in Vietnam. The term was coined by Arthur Goldstone, a professor and scientist at Yale. And Searler argues that for scientists, as well as for Richard Falk, who in 1973 outlined the legal applications of ecocide, the role that the term ecocide could play was closely tied to critical understandings of genocide. That's also important for us to keep in mind. More recently, Martin Crook and Damien Short have further elaborated on the genocide and ecocide connection and offered a framework of genocide-ecocide nexus, drawing on Raphael Lemkin's theorizing of the role of the destruction of culture in his formulation of genocide, as well as the understanding of genocide, and a quote from them, as a process at the structure and architecture of occupation, end quote. They problematize the original formulation of the concept of ecocide as a wartime crime of intent, since it's appeared in the context of the Vietnam War, and expanded the application of the crime of ecocide and the genocide-ecocide nexus to the destruction of indigenous lands by the extractive industries of capitalism. In the context of Ukraine, Svetlana Matvienko from Simon Fraser University in Canada, who has been studying environmental damage as genocide-ecocide nexus by looking at longer histories of destruction that precede the war, as well as the creation of terror environments, and that's her term. So where the concept of ecocide emerged in the war context originally, among many drivers for Stop Ecocide International, who are campaigning on the international level actively for the criminalization of ecocide, is the chance of preventing and prosecuting peacetime crimes, such as corporate crimes. And where there are possibilities in the international law to prosecute for the damage on the environment during the wartime, there's nothing of such possibility in terms of peacetime or corporate crimes. And that's why it's so important for them to really institutionalize that. And the two states that are leading this campaign on the state level is Ukraine, but also Vanuatu, a state in the Pacific, and talking about ecocide in the context of climate damage. In Ukraine, the emergence of the term ecocide signaled a dramatic shift in the awareness about the environmental impacts of the war. On the state level, the 2022 Ukraine's peace formula proposed by the Ukrainian government opens with the concern for nuclear safety and damage, so that's number one, followed by the issue of food security, points which are listed even before the question of restoring territorial integrity, right? So that's quite interesting to think about. The 8 points of the peace formula specifically addresses the urgency of ecological safety as well. Following the breach of the Kakhovka Dam, in his daily address, President Volodymyr Zelensky referred to the catastrophe as an ecocide. On the level of public discussion, multiple media articles that address the crime of ecocide have been published since 2022. And while the proliferation of the term ecocide reached a new intensity post-2022, and it wasn't really present in the public debate previously, so 2022 is really a shift in this public discussion. Debates about the environmental damage caused by the Russian invasion already existed much earlier in the first phase between 2014 and 2022, and comprehensive environmental reports were produced. And I just wanted to highlight two of them because it's important, right, how this debate evolves and changes. And the two, the one addressing particular damage to mining towns in the east of Ukraine, which was conducted by Denisov and Averin through the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 2017, and also the report by Alexei Vasylyuk and Katerina Norenko for the Ecologia Prava Людини on the impact of military action on the nature of Ukraine, particularly tracing the impact on nature reserves and conservation area. So while all this debate has happened in kind of narrow legal and environmental circles and security circles, it doesn't really, though, kind of get the attention of media as much, but also in public, people don't use the term ecocide, they don't mention it, it doesn't circulate. So it's really 2022 that signifies the shift. Some other things for me to kind of highlight in relation to the law is that, of course, one of the important aspects that changed with the introduction of ecocide as a concept globally, and the reason why this concept emerges in the first place is the question of accountability and justice. And of course, accountability and justice also central for Ukraine today. And here I would like to highlight the work of Nabil Ahmed, a leader of Interpret, part of forensic architecture, who have been working with the states of Vanuatu and Ukraine on ecocide cases, but also doing other amazing research. There's one of the examples of the research on Israel and Palestine and ecocide there. And Nabil Ahmed stresses the centrality of accountability in this framework of ecocide. For example, in his 2020 lecture, Ecocide Forensics, which he gave at Sonic Acts Academy, Ahmed underlines that we often talk about environmental damage as an abstraction, and criminalizing ecocide would allow us to bring individual people to accountability. So this individual accountability, of course, very important to law. On the contrary, environmental lawyer Carmen Gonzalez, whose name I have there, claims that the focus on individual perpetrators, which emerges through the discourse of the crime of ecocide, through the legal debate, obscures the systematic injustice of racial capitalism, for example. So we always have these questions of specificity and particularity, which are linked to accountability, but also the critique of the kind of visions of justice that are available through these legal channels, and which we have also seen coming through Anna's presentation, the limitations of the legal system, and how the legal system is also often flawed and also racialized. Right, but then the one important, also particular to environmental crimes aspect that complicates the legal investigation is, of course, the difficulty in attaining tangible evidence, I mean, which in Ukraine is in relation to accessibility to territories, but also the particular nature of environmental crimes. And speaking of climate damages, Ecocide, Polly Higgins, co-founder of Stop Ecocide International, outlined this challenge as such, and I quote from her: "Climate breakdown transcends time and space. We're also looking at something that can be a future crime," end quote. So when it comes to environment, there are complex temporalities involved, where some impacts, such as species extinction, which Anna mentioned just previously, may take years to manifest. And the dynamic nature of environments, speaking of water flows, flows in the soil, things move, And the complexity of the circulation of this matter may result in impacts being found far from the epicenter. And the Chernobyl, of course, with its nuclear clouds that contaminated forests far away from Ukraine, as far as Bavaria, is one of such a historic example in terms of how environments, how difficult it is to contain that, right, for the legal case. And so returning to Gonzalez, so she argues that the crime of ecocide fails to account for the slow violence that we witness, focusing instead on the spectacular acts of destruction, something also that Anna just brought in terms of the kind of scale and impact that can be used for the prosecution. So as we see there, all this kind of this tension between specificity and particularity so central to law, but of course then the transregional and temporal complexity, which always transcends the boundary of any defined case. And because of that, there's this spillage, right, that goes beyond the frame of legal cases, and the violence that which might never receive any form of legally enforced environmental justice. And this is where I see my work in terms of environmental humanities coming in, that goes beyond the law, outside the law, in addition to law. And the way I look at ecocide is both as a product of the public, political, and legal discussion about environmental destruction, justice, and accountability, and a catalyst for continuing this conversation and discussion through and potentially envisioning a multiplicity of forms of justice that can be pursued in addition to the legal justice, which of course is very important. And Ziller, who traces the history of the emergence of the term, describes ecocide as a versatile term. I would call it a slippery term. And I'm also in conversation with the work by Marietta Radomska, who underlines the multitude of roles that this term carries for us. And I quote from her: contemporary environmental discourses, co-created and shared by both academia and activism, have shown that the term ecocide constitutes a crucial political and philosophical tool and a reference point, even though it has primarily been formulated as a concept of legal meaning, importance, and weight. So once again, if there's a spillage and a push outside the legal understanding, right? And a constant slippage, I would argue, between the legal, which is always limited and imperfect, and yet expressing the need for tangible and concrete accountability. That's the first reason why it's there, but also political. They're addressing the need for justice in its various forms that might not always be legal. And finally, where my work comes in, the personal, grounded in laws and in kind of intimate relation to the landscapes that are under attack. And to wrap up this legal discussion, I'll do it with a quote by Zoe Samudzi, who, writing about genocide, not ecocide, states that genocide is a crime is probably the least important thing about it. And that's exactly kind of how I come in at this angle in terms of thinking about ecocide. And I arrived, I'm not a legal scholar, neither am really an environmentalist on the ground, but I arrived at this debate as an environmental humanities scholar, or first as a scholar of displacement, then converted into environmental humanities scholar through my work with people displaced from the east of Ukraine, from Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast post-2014. It was an art project called Donbas Odyssey with two amazing colleagues, Yulia Filipova, Viktor Zasypkin, in the context of displacement, we talked about the places that people left behind, their hometowns, their homes. And in that context, people quite often brought up environmental aspects in which I wasn't interested back then. So we're speaking 2015 here. So there is one of the map that was drawn by Yulia Kuzemko of her native town, Luhansk. And within Luhansk, she located the steppe. Right, she located the steppe, and she located Mount Kurgan, which is kind of an unusual, perhaps, choice. But this is not a unique situation, and many of the maps, and there's also a river, of course, but many of the maps that we worked with and many of the interviews constantly kind of reference different environments that people lost access to, that constituted home for it, this meaning of home. And if we go back to the term ecocide, which consists of two words, oikos and chadere, right, home and kill, the idea of home really is at the center of the crime of ecocide. And in that sense, displacement and ecocide are also extremely related. And I would argue, also quoting here Andriy Andrusevich, a Ukrainian lawyer who, during a panel that we were on together, he really put it very briefly and just perfectly in one short sentence, that war is an ecocide, right? So we can look at war as an event, as an ecocidal event altogether, that encompasses these different scales within it. And moreover, what I argue in my book, that to an extent, of course, to a very different extent in terms of the scale, but war displaces absolutely everybody when we look at it through an environmental angle. And by that I mean, so that even if you don't move from your hometown, the impacts of the environmental destructions, the fact that lands are mined, the fact that rivers are polluted, displaces you from the kind of environment that that you inhabited prior to 2022. And moreover, and this is where environmental humanities come in, the meanings that we attach to these places. I'm very interested in this cultural shift of how do we understand and interpret environments. What is safe, what is not safe, where's danger coming from? How do we look at the sky that basically contains, mortal danger now? How do we understand, once again, what's a forest? How does the practice of mushroom picking looks like in a wartime context, which is, it seems very, very small and irrelevant, but it changes the everyday practices of people inhabiting this land under attack. And this is precisely where I come in with this book, which does have the ecocide in the title. But while I quite often feel, and I don't know if Anna and Anna could speak in their research in Kakhovka, that ecocide is kind of seen as the end point of the discussion. So people want to know, is this ecocide, right? Is Kakhovka ecocide? And in a way that this answer, whether it is an ecocide, would give kind of certainty, potentially possibility of justice, but instead of looking at it as the end point of the discussion, of proving that this is as important as it is, and all the admiration to lawyers and environmentalists on the ground who do it, but it's not the only aspect of the debate. And I think it should be a starting point for us as well to kind of rethink the shift that we observe in Ukraine, also in terms of values and understanding of the environment, I think, and the experience of loss that we are witnessing, I would argue, prompted a further discussion of what actually environment means for us. Even the emergence of this term in public debate post-2022 signals that there's interest and there's concern for the environmental damage. And from that concern and interest, how do we actually reassess, our values and potentially maybe create a possibility for multi-species justice, for solidarity with other species, right, in the war, and for the protection of the people who do the environmental work, because once again, Anna mentioned it's a very dangerous work. It always has been a very dangerous work, because prior to the war, there was always poaching. Being an environmentalist is a dangerous profession. How do we actually develop systems of support for people who engage in this? Because it used to be one of the most underfunded, and it still is probably underfunded parts of Ukraine, within Ukrainian economy. Environmental questions are extremely underfunded. So how do we, thinking of environmental justice, envision it legally with all the important work, but also think a bit broader in terms of imagining environmental justice in the future and the role of people and environments that actually constitute it.
Thank you very much. I would like to give a word to Anna Olenenko, last but not least.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, first of all, thank you, Darya, and thank you, Anna, for your talks, for your incredible presentations. I think they gave us understanding of ecocide from the different perspectives. also, I would like to thank Darya for your book. I think it's very timely. It's very important. By the way, it's already in the library of University of Alberta. So if you would like to read it, if you're interested, you can take it, but just wait until I finish it and I return it to the library. In this talk, I will try shortly approach the notion of ecocide more critically. Please, those who use the term ecocide in your research, don't take it upon yourself. I'm one of you, but I will try to approach a little bit more critically. So I just wanted to highlight that before the war, ecocide had very little presence in Ukrainian public discourse and was either misapplied or overlooked as a concept of environmental harm. But since 2022, ecocide has become a widely used term to describe an environmental impact of the war, and it appeared in political discourse and media reporting, in environmental activism, and of course, also in academia research. I think there are a lot of hundreds of scholarly articles published after 2022, both in English and in Ukrainian, that feature ecocide in their titles and, of course, not to mention in their content. Much of this literature focuses on the legal interpretation of ecocide, of course, and particularly on efforts to recognize it as international crime. But the use of the term also expanded legal studies, expanded beyond the legal studies into natural sciences, biology, ecology, environmental studies. Scholars employ ecocide to analyze the war's effect on ecosystems, biodiversity, and pollution. And I think Anna Kuzemko has already demonstrated us how important it is. As for the humanities, humanities also have incorporated this concept, including my own research, including Darya's research, and even when scholars do not engage in a deeper conceptual analysis of ecocide, they nevertheless employ the term primarily to underscore environmental damage related to the war. In my view, this has resulted in overuse of this term to the point where virtually all forms of environmental damage caused by the war are labeled as ecocide. And as a consequences, we encounter numerous accounts of human-caused harm to the environment, but fewer studies that address broader and more complex dimension of human environmental interactions. So to better understand the reasons behind the use of term ecocide, I draw on Rob Nixon's influential concept of slow violence and Susan Nettles' framework on genocide-ecocide nexus. Nixon defines slow violence as a form of environmental harm that unfolds gradually and often invisibly, disproportionately affecting marginalized communities. And one of the Nixon's key points is that slow violence is underrepresented in media and policy discussions because of its protracted nature and lack of immediate spectacle. So to attract attention in the age that venerates instant spectacle, events must be dramatic, immediate, and visually compelling. He observes that the media and public discourse are far more responsive to what we can define as fast violence, although Nixon himself doesn't use this term, but other scholars have adopted it to refer to the sudden, visible, and spectacular forms of environmental destruction. These are the types of the events that receive immediate coverage and provoke strong reactions in the media and in academic discourse as well. So war with its highly visible and often catastrophic consequences fits neatly into the category of fast violence. Ecological destruction that is immediate and measurable is far easier to discuss and to analyze. When such events are framed using the powerful term ecocide, they almost inevitably attract attention. The term can galvanize public opinion, attract international support, and mobilize resources for recovery and justice, as Darya has already mentioned. So in addition to the argument that the term ecocide has gained prominence because it describes immediate and measurable war-related destruction, thereby attracting attention in the society, it is also widely employed in a context where responsibility can be clearly assigned. Susan Little, in her article Ecologies of Violence, Cultural Memory, and the Genocide-Ecocide Nexus, examines the perpetrator turn in memory studies. It is scholarly trend that analyzes the perspectives, motivations, and actions of those who commit violence or atrocities, rather than focusing solely on victims and survivors. While this framework is not always directly applied to environmental discussions, it prompted me to consider more carefully the question of responsibility in cases of ecocide. I began to consider to attend to the language surrounding the term ecocide, specifically noting who or what is identified in a connection with it. Now, almost every form of environmental destruction caused by the war in Ukraine is interpreted through the lens of ecocide. This clarity enhances the term's effectiveness and emotional resonance, especially when there is a clearly identifiable aggressor. Indeed, the presence of an obvious perpetrator makes it easier to classify it as an act of ecocide. Analysis of the scholarly and media text reveals that the responsible party is often explicitly named. For example, titles such as Ecocide in Ukraine as a result of targeted Russia's war crimes directly identify the aggressor. Also, Darya, you in your book also used the word ecocide in the title and use it together with Russia's war. So Russia's ecocide is constantly repeated in a scholarly world. So there is little room for doubt. Russia is aggressor. Therefore, Russia is responsible for environmental destruction in Ukraine. And this unambiguous attribution of responsibility reinforces the term's rapid uptake and underscores its link to notions of justice and reparation, including hopes for future accountability or compensation. However, if we focus exclusively on the perpetrator, I think we risk falling into a trap of simple blame without critically reflecting of why certain forms of environmental destruction are labeled ecocide. Two problematic assumptions can emerge. First, that only fast, sudden, and visible forms of destruction qualify as ecocide. And second, the ecocide always involves a clear, identifiable perpetrator. But what about less visible, less spectacular forms of ecosystem degradation? And perhaps most importantly, what about the harms for which we ourselves are responsible? And this leads us to the concept of autoecocide, the self-inflicted, often systematic destruction of a nation's own environment. As Arthur Galston, as Darya already mentioned, he was the first who used the term ecocide in the 1970s. He observed decades ago, and I quote, "I believe that the most highly developed nations have already committed autoecocide over large parts of their own countries," end of quote. So in contemporary Ukraine, environmental damage caused by war is meticulously documented, counted, and condemned. Ukrainian governmental agencies, environmental non-governmental organizations, international organizations are deeply engaged in gathering data on the ecological consequences of the Russia's invasion. Yet the damage we inflict on ourselves is often ignored. And I'm talking here not only about the past, but also about the present situation. And this discrepancy suggests that it is politically, emotionally, and discursively easier to discuss ecocide when external perpetrator can be named. This raises an important question. Does the widespread focus on ecocide prevent us from acknowledging our own responsibility for environmental harm? I would answer yes and no, but I prefer to think that it can also compel us to confront the uncomfortable reality of autoecocide. I think that the prominence of ecocide discourse allows us to consider environmental destruction beyond the war and beyond the colonial impacts on Ukraine. Even as attention remains focused on wartime destruction, this discourse opens space to reconsider the broader trajectory of environmental degradation in Ukraine. The destruction of Ukraine's environment did not begin in 2022, and or 2014, and if we take ecocide seriously, we must also take the history of autoecocide seriously. So one of the important questions for me is their place for eco in ecocide. The increasing use of the term ecocide has pushed me to reflect on a critical question. When we invoke this term to describe the destruction of ecosystem, do we really think about the ecosystem themselves? Do we center the environment in our analysis? Of course, crimes against humans and against the environment are interconnected, that's for sure. We recognize that environment encompasses more than a narrow concept of nature. But at the core of ecocidal practices, the targets are often non-humans, ecosystems, habitats, and landscapes. And when we are talking about ecocide, whose laws are we addressing? Is ecocide a crime against nature itself or against environment as a human habitat? Who is the victim of ecocide, humans or non-humans? And as David Ziller, a historian of ecocide, observes, ecocide has historically functioned as a tactic of war. It's a form of violence that targets humans indirectly through environmental destruction. Arthur Galston said that ecocide is a crime against humanity affected through the destruction of the environment necessary for human life. Of course, after for a lot of time, there were different definition of ecocide and different approaches how to think about ecocide, about human or about non-human. But I would like to highlight that those authors I mentioned state that the environment is valuable primarily because it sustains human life. And this anthropocentric logic persists in much contemporary discourse on the ecocide, unfortunately, although some scholars argue for an expanded understanding of genus, encompassing not only human groups, but also non-human life and ecosystems. And the term remains largely human-centered, although. So that's even when the term ecocide is employed and even when it emerged from an ecological framing of violence, it doesn't always signify genuine ecological thinking. More often, humans remain at the center. Though recently this has begun to change, of course. across. So despite such a little bit critical view on the ecocide term, I would like to mention that at least we have one positive thing. Ecocide attracted attention, and Ukrainian environment finally became visible in public discourse and in academia, of course, within environmental history, within environmental humanities, and within Ukrainian studies around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all three speakers. We're very extremely thankful to our participants that have joined us from all over the world, from different parts of the world. Thank you very much for your participation, for your interest in the topic, and please do follow the seminar series. It's the first seminar of the seminar series about Ukraine's environment. And thank you very much to our keynote speakers for today.